The faint beeping sound of Lu Jin Nian occasionally tapping his phone screen filled the room, hovering around Ann Qiao Hao's ears. It was unclear how much time had passed, but when Lu Jin Nian locked the screen, the room fell completely silent again. It was so quiet that Ann Qiao Hao could hear his breathing. Ann Qiao Hao lay down too quickly, and the position felt uncomfortable. She didn't dare move too much, but carefully shifted her position slightly. However, even with that small movement, it disturbed Lu Jin Nian on the other side of the bed. He immediately turned over sharply, and the force of his movement made Ann Qiao Hao freeze in fear, too scared to move. It seemed Lu Jin Nian wasn't in the best mood. He must have been bothered by something. Ann Qiao Hao couldn't sleep, her attention entirely focused on Lu Jin Nian, her mind unable to relax. Suddenly, Lu Jin Nian threw off the covers and stood up. His movements were a bit harsh, and Ann Qiao Hao was so frightened that she didn't even dare to shake. Ann Qiao Hao didn't dare open her eyes to look at Lu Jin Nian. She kept her eyes shut, hearing his footsteps, and then the flick of a lighter, followed by the faint smell of cigarette smoke spreading across the room. Ann Qiao Hao had always thought that Lu Jin Nian didn't smoke, but this was the first time since their marriage that he had smoked in front of her. She felt confused. When had he started smoking? Lu Jin Nian took 2 puffs and then glanced over at the bed where Ann Qiao Hao was lying and the teddy bear next to her, which was even bigger than she was. Then he nonchalantly turned his head and walked toward the balcony, opening the window. After finishing his cigarette, Lu Jin Nian waited for the smoke to dissipate before closing the window and returning to bed. This time, when he lay down, he didn't move at all. Without Lu Jin Nian repeatedly disturbing her, Ann Qiao Hao felt her anxiety, but with the teddy bear separating them and feeling a little tired, she finally began to relax, gradually slipping into sleep. Ann Qiao Hao didn't know how long she had slept, but suddenly her wrist was roughly seized by someone. A sharp pain shot through her entire body. Ann Qiao Hao, still half asleep, furrowed her brows and slowly opened her eyes. Then she saw Lu Jin Nian sitting on the other side of the teddy bear, staring at her with cold, icy eyes, and spoke to her in a tone void of warmth. "So you want to try and seduce me while I'm asleep again?" Ann Qiao Hao snapped awake, staring at him in confusion. She lowered her head and then realized, to her surprise, that her hand had somehow slipped through the teddy bear and was resting next to Lu Jin Nian. Instinctively, she tried to pull her hand back, but Lu Jin Nian gripped it even harder. His voice clearly carried a mocking tone. "So what's this? Just finished the first film and now you can't wait to trade your body for the second?"
Qiao Hao became pale as Lu Jin Nian mocked her. Ironically, the events of that night had formed a prejudice in his mind. Even if she explained herself, he wouldn't believe her. Suppressing the deep sorrow in her heart, she spoke softly. "I didn't mean it." "Didn't mean it?" Lu Jin Nian sneered mockingly, his face cold as ice. His words were sharp and merciless. "I never imagined, Miss Anne, that not only are you an expert at taking advantage of situations, but your ability to speak one thing and mean another is second to none. If I remember correctly, it was you who crawled into my bed while I was drunk, and that night, you were the one who begged me to sleep with you." Lu Jin Nian's words cut like a knife, each one slicing into Ann Qiao Hao's heart, making her feel like her heart was bleeding. It was true. On that night, she had begged him, but at that time, she had been drunk, not in her right mind, and she thought it was just a dream. That is why she whispered in his ear, "Let me be your woman." Ann Qiao Hao never expected that Lu Jin Nian would mock her over that night. Immediately, her face turned crimson with shame, feeling utterly humiliated. She pinched herself in an attempt to drown out the pain his words had caused her. Then, in a calm voice, she continued to explain to Lu Jin Nian, "I really didn't mean to seduce you. I was just sleeping, and I didn't realize my hand touched you." "It's best if that's the case," Lu Jin Nian said coldly, his tone laced with arrogance. "However, let me make it clear. Although you started the game, how it continues is up to me. You might think you can use your body to get something from me, but the premise is that I need to be interested in sleeping with you first." He paused briefly, his voice becoming even more disdainful. "If I'm not interested, no matter how much you beg, like you did last time, I won't even touch a finger of yours." Hearing these words, the blood drained from Ann Qiao Hao's face, leaving her pale. Throughout Lu Jin Nian's words, she had kept her head lowered, too afraid to look up at his expression. Once Lu Jin Nian finished speaking, he coldly brushed her hand off, got off the bed, and walked to the closet. When Lu Jin Nian emerged from the closet fully dressed, Ann Qiao Hao remained in the same position she had been in before he left the bed. Her small figure hunched over, her head lowered as if a child being scolded. Her demeanor exuded innocence under the dim light. Lu Jin Nian stood at the doorway of the closet, silently staring at Ann Qiao Hao for a moment. Then his gaze darkened, and he turned, opened the bedroom door, and left.
Long after Lu Jin Nian had left, Ann Qiao Hao slowly lifted her head and stared at the empty side of the bed where he had just been. She then placed the large teddy bear aside, leaned her face into the spot where Lu Jin Nian had lain, still warm with his lingering presence. Ann Qiao Hao greedily inhaled the warmth left on the blanket, then rubbed her face against it where his body heat still clung. A faint bitter feeling stirred in her heart. Even when he spoke to her so cruelly, she still couldn't muster the strength to stop loving him. At the wrap party for Till the End of Time last night, Xiaoming had been right. This wasn't how things had been between her and Lu Jin Nian in the past. When he was at school, it was normal for him to have good relationships with male students. However, he avoided the female students as much as possible. She, however, was different from the others because she was able to talk to him. Of course, it wasn't because he was particularly interested in her, it was because of Xu Jiamu. Xu Jiamu's family had deep ties with the Qiao family, which is why Ann Qiao Hao had grown up alongside Xu Jiamu, forming a close friendship. Lu Jin Nian was Xu Jiamu's half-brother, and though he was from the same family, he was a child born out of wedlock. Although their different family backgrounds had never created any tension between Lu Jin Nian and Xu Jiamu, they had a particularly strong bond. Ann Qiao Hao had met Lu Jin Nian through Xu Jiamu, allowing her to have more opportunities to talk to him than other girls. However, it was nothing more than casual small talk, mostly hello, hi, and goodbye, just polite phrases with no real substance. When she was younger, she had no inhibitions. Her heart would race, and she would actively approach him. She wasn't as bold as the other girls who would confess their feelings to him, write him love letters, or give him chocolate on Valentine's Day, but she always quietly observed him, whether at school, on the sports field, or by chance encountering him on the way home. She tried to suppress the youthful excitement in her heart and would pretend it was a coincidence, waiting for him to call out to her. Sometimes he would respond, other times just a simple nod. Even though their exchanges were dry and lacked meaningful conversation, she would still feel a great sense of happiness that would linger for hours. She hadn't ever dared to confess her feelings to him, though she had often dreamed of being with him. Their relationship remained cordial, maintaining a safe distance between them. But she was content, and as the days went by, her affection for him deepened, eventually turning into a love so deep it became etched into her heart. When she got to university, she didn't know what had happened, but Lu Jin Nian's attitude toward her had become cold and distant, even seemingly hostile. At first, she thought she was being too sensitive, that her love for him had created these illusions. But later, by chance, Ann Qiao Hao overheard Xu Jiamu mentioning that Lu Jin Nian had someone he loved. Then once, while having a meal, she couldn't help but ask who the person in his heart was. At that time, even though Lu Jin Nian had repeatedly shown impatience towards her, there was one occasion when he lost his patience completely. Even after a long time, she still vividly remembered how, with a cold and indifferent look on his face, he had told her, "No matter who I like, it's not you." At that moment, Ann Qiao Hao fully realized that Lu Jin Nian truly disliked her. Although she didn't fully understand why he hated and repulsed her, from that point on, she had wisely started to distance herself from him. As Zhao Meng had said, from that moment onward, she and Lu Jin Nian hardly ever communicated. Even when they happened to meet, they were like strangers, not exchanging words. If they were forced to speak, his words were always harsh and hurtful. Because she loved him so much, she paid close attention to everything he said. Because she loved him so deeply, his words could easily wound her in the most vulnerable parts of her heart. Over time, she developed a fear of facing him, a fear of interacting with him. Not for any other reason, but because she was afraid that as soon as he spoke, his words would cause her pain and bleed her heart dry. In truth, Ann Qiao Hao had always thought that there was no possibility of ever being with him. They would just continue living separate lives. But one day, fate played a cruel joke, and she and Lu Jin Nian ended up becoming husband and wife. Heaven knows how happy and excited she was when she found out she and Lu Jin Nian had become husband and wife. She knew he disliked her, so on their wedding night, she wisely promised she wouldn't interfere with his life, wouldn't affect him, and most importantly, wouldn't let anyone know the relationship between them. She loved him so much that in the haze of drunkenness that night, she ended up seducing him. She thought that Lu Jin Nian truly disliked her to the extreme, which is why after being with her, he became so angry. In truth, she didn't want him to think that she had jumped into his arms for the role in the movie, but she had no other choice. She had to pretend to be a girl who craved vanity, like the other girls who would sacrifice their bodies for fame and fortune to justify that embrace. Because after all, he had once said, "No matter who I like, it's not you." Thinking about this, the corners of Ann Qiao Hao's eyes became slightly moist. After Lu Jin Nian left, Ann Qiao Hao couldn't fall asleep until the early hours of the morning. In the following days, she didn't meet Lu Jin Nian again, and there wasn't even the slightest news of him.